and I was actually with primary industry department based in Chimbu, but I got around a bit. So I did come to Yalabu, I remember, in 1978, and went down to Mendi and up to Tauri. So I'm not completely new, but it still comes as a reminder when you suddenly face the new temperature at 2,000 meters, coming straight from Port Moresby. So, what would you like to talk about? We've been talking about economic integrity, national progress, grey listing, sustainability. So, which provinces are you all from? How many are from Yalabu district? 1, 2, 3. How many from Southern Highlands? A few more? Yeah. How many from what they call the Upper Highlands, which is how many from the Highlands region as a whole? Good crowd. How many from the New Guinea Islands? Oh, there's a good crowd from NGI. Momasi. Oh, a good crowd, Momasi. And the Papua and Southern region. Up here? Yeah. Okay, so you're a pretty universal Papua New Guinean group. So I actually visited Western Pacific University before it was sort of open, together with my good friend, the late Kelly Khalid. Back in, I think it must have been 2019, we came through, and I think Father Jan invited us through, so he showed us. And then in 2022, we came through again when we were doing a little study looking at Chinese financing of different projects and so on. So we did a report on it. So I've had a little bit of engagement. So the subject we're here to talk about: economic integrity, national progress, grey listing, sustainability. There are 4 different but related concepts. So what would you say is national progress? What would your definitions of national progress be? Anyone want to voice an opinion on what national progress is?
An example of national progress would be an extension of the road from one part of this province to the other. Getting this road from Karua down to Jeremy.
Oh yeah, that's certainly progress. Actually, I know from Kagua down to Kikori, that was a traditional route, and there are a lot of marriages between Iravis and Kikoris, so you'll find a lot of genetic interaction going on over a long period of time. So national progress. There are a lot of economists and statisticians who sit there and work on what is national progress, and often you hear the use of the term GDP, gross domestic product, national output, national input, and that's how much a country actually produces, and so that's a reflection of national progress. And then you have GDP per capita, which is how much is the total output from a country, or the total income from the country, because the two are meant to come out and work out to be the same, but you use a different way to collect the information. Per capita is how much is the progress that is being made in production terms per head of population. So obviously, if you've got an increase in over a period of time of 10%, but you've actually had a 15% population growth, you'll actually have been going backwards on a per capita head basis. But if your population growth is less than the overall output, then in theory, you're getting more production And presumably that's some sort of progress. But of course, it's only one reflection, so that's widely used. Politicians use the term the whole time, GDP is growing by so much, and that's sort of, therefore, aren't we doing well? Yeah, well, that's true, but what if a large slice of the GDP is slipping out of the country, or if it's being absorbed by a small portion of the population? We talk about the AI revolution. I posted something the other day saying, what's going to be the benefit of AI? I hope it's not just going to be in terms of a few trillionaires becoming super wealthy and the rest of us all being put out of our jobs. But if you have a country that is immensely wealthy with natural resources, with oil and gas and minerals and gold, but a large portion of the wealth just ends up with a small group of people, and they maybe are taking the money out of the country and investing in Sydney real estate or Paris real estate and Ferrari cars in overseas, and the rest of the community's lives haven't changed, well, maybe there's not so much progress. Actually, one of the reviewers for Oil Search before once said to me, actually looking down in Iravi, down in those projects, he said, I haven't, and I've heard it from in Western Province, I haven't seen such a change in the lifestyle of some of the villagers over all these years of resource projects. So the money's coming and going somewhere, but where's it going and who are the beneficiaries? So progress has to be measured in different terms. GDP is a very useful mechanism for assessing progress, but it can't be the only mechanism. Other mechanisms, and if you go to the UNDP or the World Health Organization, you'll see lots of statistics for different countries, and they're talking about what the social indicators are. So what are the births and deaths? How many children are dying under the age of 5? What are the maternal death rates in childbirth? Or what is the life expectancy? So PNG's life expectancy at independence was below 60. It's now meant to be 66, so that's a significant increase in the life expectancy. Life expectancy, of course, is determined on a statistical total population basis, and a lot of that is influenced by the high death rate that we still have in the under 5s. So once you've reached 40, you've got a high probability of getting to 70 or older. But if a lot of you are dying under 5 of malnutrition or a range of different diseases, then clearly that's distorting the whole data. But nevertheless, PNG is 66, but across the Pacific, the life expectancy is 70 plus. Across Asia Pacific, it's well over 70. So PNG, as an indicator, it's not doing as well as it should be. And I would say it's not doing nearly as well as the founding fathers and mothers of PNG would have been expecting before independence and when independence was coming along. We had there's a constitution, national constitution, which is all about, and what's called the goals and directive principles, which is all about, do you all know the constitution of PNG? Do you know the goals and directive principles, which everyone should know? You don't have to read the whole constitution, it's a bit of a long document, but it's really good to know what the goals and directive principles are, because they're the founding basis. All the laws of the land are meant to be consistent with those goals and directive principles, which basically say, we want equal equity and opportunities. So places that are remote must have access to educational and health opportunities, as well as people in the urban areas. That we've got to look after the future generations, not just the current. We've got to look after our natural resources for the welfare and interest of all the population, not just the current population that are here today. That we have to basically look after men, women, and children. That we are meant to follow Melanesian ways, so we don't just pick up what's available from Hollywood at the moment, but we actually respect the traditions, and we understand the traditions, and we try to sort of develop and respect PNG ways. So these are all the founding steps. And at the time of the Constitution, the government also introduced this 8-point plan and where it wanted to go, and it was wanting to achieve, and you'll see it in the early national budgets, wanted to achieve universal education, for primary education by about 1985. Well, we haven't got there yet. They certainly wanted to have universal school-age literacy by the mid-1980s. Well, we still haven't got there, and we certainly haven't got the adult literacy. That's a long way off as well. But we're even having people who are in school and the standards are not there, so we're getting people who are not financially or numerically and in language literate in schools. So we have not achieved many of the things. We have extraordinarily high malnutrition levels, and again, we were meant to have removed malnutrition. That was a major focus. So somewhere in the 80s, there was a real recognition of the importance of human resource development, and somewhere we forgot about it. Because we know that countries that have been successful and where you get sustainability are countries, Japan doesn't have a lot of natural resources. It's got a lot of volcanoes, but not many other natural resources. Taiwan, immensely productive economy, but it also has a lot of earthquakes, and but it doesn't have a lot of other natural resources. Singapore, city-state. These places are focused on human resource development. Countries like Finland and South Korea, they produce, over the years, some of our fanciest little, it used to be Nokia in those days, and from Finland, and Samsung from South Korea. You'll find in those countries, they have highest educational standards in the world, because they realized Finland's a cold place. It's got a lot of trees, but it doesn't grow anything, because for anything to grow, half the year it's sort of sub-freezing temperatures, and the sun doesn't even come up. So they recognized that they needed to invest. So in Finland, if you want to become a primary school teacher, you have to have the absolute top grades in university. And they say, primary school teachers, we need our kids to get the best education available, so our teachers have to be absolutely top. So the teachers are going to be people who are, the engineers and the doctors often have to, select from the people who haven't become teachers. So sometimes we've got great teachers in PNG, but sometimes we allow standards not to be there. It's got to be a recognized top profession and top skill, because they are the people in universities and in schools who, along with parents, who determine what happens to the next generation. So education, investment in human skills is absolutely critical, and those countries like South Korea and Finland, they actually were developing countries not that long ago. Finland was like a colony of Russia, or part of Russia, and South Korea was a colony of partly of sometimes China, but of Japan. But they got independence, they focused on education, and PNG, over the course of years, despite that early commitment in those early years, somewhere around the late 1990s, we sort of slipped and we thought, it's all about getting lots of new resource projects. Bougainville closed down, but let's get lots of new resource projects. Well, yes, they can play a part, but you can be immensely resource rich, but it doesn't fix the problem. many years ago we had so INA is an independent public policy think tank based in Moresby, but we also run a thing called CIMC. I don't know if any of you have heard of CIMC. Anyone heard of CIMC? It's called the Consultative Implementation and Monitoring Council. But we hold regional development forums. We had one just a couple of weeks ago in Mount Hagen. We had one a month ago in Madang and for the regions. Well, years ago we held one in Mendi, and we had a lot of people came down from Tari, and it was interesting. The mothers from Hela were saying, we are telling our kids to get education and school and university or college, but the kids are saying, no, why would we bother doing that? We've got gas, we're all going to be oil sheikhs from Hela. But the mothers were right, not the kids, because the construction phase of LNG is a very short phase. Yes, if a mining project lasts longer and employs quite a lot more people, but the LNG gas, short construction phase, people give up their jobs and become welders on the construction, but at the end of that, they haven't got a job again. Yes, they may be landowners and they may be getting royalties, but a lot of those young people, when we were doing work together with the United States Institute for Peace a couple of years ago, and we were talking to community leaders, church leaders, women leaders and others, they're saying, we've got a problem up here in Hela. The young people have got nothing to do. The teenage kids are scaring the older people and they're holding them up in the markets. Please find opportunities in agriculture and skills development for our young people, because otherwise they're getting frustrated and they're not all. And the mothers were right. They said, go and get educated, because that is what is the sustainable future for a country, and the resources are the little bonus that gives a good revenue to the state that can invest if you agree to good agreements for those resource projects and you don't give them away for too little. But it's the human resources all around the world that is critical for long-term and sustainable development. So I'll mention there, so what is economic integrity? So economic integrity is all about having all the, I don't know why I opened my computer because I haven't even switched it on, but anyway. So economic integrity is all about having the systems of governance and economic management, accountable economic management, having the private sector performing its functions, but taxing them and having transparent mechanisms, and within economic, and having proper market prices for things, not fixing prices, distorting prices. Within economic management, you have fiscal integrity as well. And fiscal integrity is about having, that's your inflow, having a decent budget, transparency in your budget, in budgeting, how you plan to use your money, how you do use the money, and accounting for that money, enabling the public to participate, have proper oversight by the Auditor General, by Parliament, have the systems and the checks and balances. If you don't have the fiscal and economic integrity, then you may have as many resources as you like, and you're going to potentially waste them, and they're not going to be invested wisely, and you're not going to be accounting for them wisely, and therefore you're not going to move from just utilizing the resources to actually a sustainable economic and social path. And I understand that you recently had a talk or a podcast from EITI and the Secretariat of EITI. So that was that's an institution, a global institution called the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, EITI. And it was set up back in the early 2000s because academics and some NGOs like Oxfam and Publish What You Pay and some governments said, hey, there's something wrong here. There are some really wealthy countries like Equatorial Guinea in West Africa, Nigeria, oil-rich countries, others that had a lot of diamonds and this, and yet we're seeing the leaders of those countries living it up in New York and Paris and having fast cars and nice palaces, but their population, their national progress, their social indicators are living poor. The palace in Equatorial Guinea is absolutely lavish, but all outside the gates there are impoverished people living there hand to mouth. Something a little bit wrong. So the EITI was a mechanism that was introduced, and Papua New Guinea became a member of it in 2014. And it basically looks at how much is actually paid for the resources of a country by the companies. So are they paying the proper world prices? And how much is being recorded by the governments as actually being received? And if there's a big difference, there's something wrong. If they're not paying global prices, there's something wrong. If the government isn't recording in its government books, where is the money going? Is it being siphoned off somewhere? Or is it going into strange state enterprises and so on? So PNG has been doing that now and we produce an annual report every year, and each year it improves, and the standards under EITI are becoming more demanding, but we're still a long way from actually achieving all those standards. So we're getting better at actually recording the inflows and the outflows, but we don't actually know exactly what should be flowing because we don't actually have contract transparency, which is one of the requirements. We're moving towards beneficial ownership, so we actually know there's meant to be information on the environment, so we should have all the environmental plans being publicly available. So the state-owned enterprises are a concern because we should have a sovereign wealth fund where we put the proceeds of the resources into the sovereign wealth fund. Instead, what we've been doing, we've been borrowing very extensively internationally and borrowing to buy shares in these resource projects. Hang on, we already own the resource. Surely they should be paying for the resource, and we should be getting taxes from the resource. Why are we buying and borrowing money internationally to buy through state-owned enterprises? Why are we buying into these resource companies? So that's a bit of a questionable thing, because then you have to pay back those debts, you're servicing the debts, and what have we had in PNG? We've actually seen the amount of money that's allocated for road transport, for example, and for health and education, displaced by the amount of money that we have to service international debts, because we've been borrowing every single year since 2011. Well, that's a bit funny because we're a resource-rich country. We've got new resource projects in gold. Sometimes the prices of these are very high in gold and oil, and yet we've been borrowing every year, and we're still borrowing for this year's budget, and the aim under a consolidation effort that the government's been doing to try and manage its fiscal exposure is that by 2027 we actually have a balanced budget. But we still have an enormous amount of debt that we've accumulated over many years, which we're still having to service, and we're having to service basically means interest rate, and that is money that you can't use for other things like health, education, and other activities which you need, because Papua New Guinea, it's as we say, it's a resource-rich country. It's got enough resources to be able to meet the needs of the country and to develop. But the country does have high costs. As you know, the country doesn't have the big road network established over hundreds of years that many countries have. It's got mountain ranges, so it's expensive to build infrastructure, whether it's power or water supplies or roads. You've got lots of islands, so you've got to move around from place to place. But it has to have a lot of resources, so if it manages its budget properly, it should have enough, but it needs to manage that budget. So we cannot afford to waste. So mechanisms like the EITI is one mechanism that we introduced, and we got some parallel mechanisms. We've got something called the Open Government Partnership. So it's a global thing. PNG became a member of it in 2015. My colleague Wallace Yakam, who's from here, well, from Mendi anyway, she actually attended. It was quite funny because the OGP annual meeting is usually headed by all the prime ministers of all the countries, but PNG didn't manage to send a diplomat or a government because of a bit of a cash flow shortage. So it was actually, they were introducing onto the platform the Prime Minister of Ecuador, the Prime Minister, and Wallace Yakam from INA and CIMC in Papua New Guinea. Anyway, she enjoyed that, I think. Little short spell of VIP treatment. You don't often get it when you're working in NGOs. So, but the Open Government Partnership is another mechanism that the government has introduced to open up the government systems, and it's got some components to which the government is committed. Fiscal transparency, so opening up all the financial systems, the budget and so on. Public participation, so all the processes of government are, and so as I say, on fiscal transparency, Treasury and the INA are the co-chairs on that platform. The public participation, CIMC with Department for Community Development are meant to be the lead co-chairs on that. And then we've got access or rights to information, and the Department of Information and Communication Technology, together with Transparency International PNG, the co-chairs of that, working with Justice Department to roll out the Freedom of Information legislation, which has been a long time in coming. It's in the constitution of PNG that you had 50 years ago that the Papua New Guineans have the right to information and the right for freedom of expression, freedom of the media and so on. And that specific laws will be put in place to empower those rights. Well, we're now 50 years later. We're just hopefully rolling out, hopefully this year, because it would be really good to get it out before we go completely into election mode, to get that legislation out. But that is a really empowering piece of legislation which shifts the focus of government. So instead of government, so at the time of independence, government agreed to a lot of decentralization to the provincial governments. A lot of key functions that related to services at the local level were meant to be delivered by the provincial governments. Since then, we moved back on some of that. We maintained a commitment to decentralization, but in reality, we changed the provincial government system from direct election of provincial governments, and we gave all the power to the open members of parliament and put them all on the provincial governments. We put in the governors who were a bit distinct, but still national members of parliament, and we put the local level government presidents onto the district development authorities, and into the provincial governments. But anyway, since then, even the provincial government, a lot of the resources then has been directed to the DDAs, which are not a constitutional tier of government. That is the national government, the provincial government, the LLGs and the wards. So we've given all this money, which is often not very accountably planned or managed, to the district tier, 10 million, and now it's an added extra infrastructure to 20 million. That's a lot of money when you actually only have, limited institutional capacity and engagement. But as I say, some districts are using it much better, and some of them are much less accountable. But we've moved back, and instead of supported the decentralization, to a large extent, we've multiplied the number of national institutions. We've got now 38 ministers plus the Prime Minister, so that makes it the most, Charles Abel was highlighting, that makes us the country with the most cabinet ministers per capita of population in the world. So we've got a lot of top down, but they're not really working in a synchronized way, and then the tiers of government are not working. So you want to avoid waste, but you need actually your provincial health authority to work with the provincial government, to work with the DDAs that have a lot of money, and also with the ward councils and the LLGs that actually have constitutional responsibility. Work together, and with the National Health Department, which isn't the implementer but has some coordination roles and data management roles. So I'll just say, yeah, we've got another entity, every 2 years we conduct something called the Open Budget Survey, which is looking at how open is the budget of Papua New Guinea. And we do it with all these countries around the world, and PNG's budget, we've still got a long way to go. We only publish, and people think when you mention the word budget, a lot of people, they cloud over, that's for accountants, that's sort of boring stuff. We'll leave that to some